So, Scott, once again, thank you so much for being a part of the program.
I'm a chef by trade, retired. I've always been interested in space, always followed NASA when they first started coming online with some of their documentation in the late 1990s. When everything was available online, I started reading all of their documents. They had their PDF files that they were providing on their report server and from their journal site. For years, I just kept reading all the technical data on their tests and progress, inventions, new technology, new materials, and everything else. And up until the mid 2000s, I thoroughly believed that they landed on the moon. I mean, I heard rumors here and there that it didn't happen and stuff.
Right.
I watched a couple of videos that really made me curious. So then I started downloading all of the photographs from the journal site and started to study them. And rather than look at what other people were doing and what their results were or what their findings were, I just stayed to myself because I wanted my results to be from my own findings. And the videos I've produced and the articles I've written are based on all of those findings. And you'll find them on the ALICE site. The videos are at Apollo Detectives and as well as Paul and the Flame.
Very nice. And of course, I noticed since the last time we talked, you have acquired some new friends, some new naysayers who want to debunk you now, Scott.
Oh, they're always out there. There's been a few new ones lately.
Right.
I would like to tell you that the research is continuing. I research all the time. That is my main thing. It doesn't matter where I need to look for the information on Apollo and NASA and things like that. I'll look anywhere to find out because it doesn't matter whether a person or a site has any credibility or not. Sometimes there's a little bit of truth in there, or there's some new information that I need to do some more research on. And I currently have a friend, and he went out and bought a bunch of vacuum equipment. So he can pull a vacuum of Tor to the -3 with the equipment. And he has taken the Hasselblad film, the actual Kodak ester film, and he's been putting it through vacuum tests in his chambers and developing the film. And I've witnessed all of it. I've watched him do the development, the photography, everything else. What it's going to show is that the film itself is being affected by the vacuum. The results will be presented by both Marcus Allen and David Percy. Will do an entire write-up on it when the tests are finalized.
I forgot to ask you, have you talked with Randy?
Yes, I have.
How's he doing?
I'm in his book.
Yeah.
He's going to do another chapter or so just on the photographs. We're working on that right now, as a matter of fact.
Very nice, very nice.
And he's getting some very good sales on his books as well. His first book, of course, is based on mainly the Saturn V rocket and the thrust and propulsion of the F1 engines.
Yes, that, of course, is the book, The Apollo Moon Missions, Hiding a Hoax in Plain Sight. A very, very good book.
Once you read that, you really have to question the ability to lift enough equipment into space with the amount of thrust that the Saturn V had. It really puts that into question, and anybody out there listening should buy his book and read it. He has done an incredible amount of research on the topic, and he's very knowledgeable.
That's pretty wild. And of course, as I was saying to you earlier, you do have some naysayers out there and people that are trying to debunk you, and you shouldn't exactly take it as a sign of disrespect. At least you got those people to open their minds just a little bit.
The fact of the matter that it may anger them,
sure,
doesn't change the fact. If in fact we did not land on the moon, which it's very much not just in my opinion, but it's very factual from the studies I've done that nobody landed there. If that upsets people, you have to just control your emotions and go back and just look at what my findings are and realize that these things are just so difficult to do. The fact that we're not doing it today is a very prime example that it didn't happen. That article you sent me just before the show.
Oh, yes.
is just another prime example of a delay.
Yeah, and we talked about this the last time you were here. We both, well, actually, I had asked you if you think they were going to push the date back, and what happened? They pushed
Yeah,
the
they've
date
done it
back.
again. They've done it again, and it's going to happen again. I mean, you realize they're not even talking about human spaceflight there. The 2024 Orion mission was unmanned, not a landing, just fly around.
By the way, Lee, if you didn't read the article, NASA basically wants to go to Mars over the moon.
Yeah, I did read that.
In the article, they want to take control of all of the equipment and have full control of the employees and the crew of the equipment so that they can compartmentalize the situation if they need to fake it.
Well, that way they can control the narrative. And,
That's right.
I think about Don Pettit, who was an astronaut, and they had asked him, and it's a famous video on YouTube, why we don't go back to the moon. And he said that he'd go back in quote unquote a nanosecond, but it's a painful process because when you really let that sink in, the idea that we haven't been back to the moon in almost 50 years and that NASA purposely destroyed all of the telemetry and all of the technology, quote unquote, they used to go to the moon. Really what it comes down to is that when I was growing up, the moon was televised on 3 networks and you believed Walter Cronkite. And all you had to do was convince Walter Cronkite that it was real and he would convince the world. And everything, in my opinion, is compartmentalized. The job I work at in logistics, there's many different compartments, and they do the same thing at NASA. Most people that work at NASA believe we landed on the moon and believe they're doing good work. But in the actual hierarchy at the top, it's compartmentalized, and they are not flying or have ever flown to the moon because it just can't be done. And they just keep kicking the can down the road.
Well, that's very apparent with the actual spacesuits. My article on ALICE is a complete breakdown of the development of the spacesuits through its inception, through Apollo, and right up to the new Artemis suit. And I don't know if you've watched the video when they were displaying the Artemis suit, and they had that woman come out on stage wearing the suit, and it was supposed to be pressurized to 8 psi, and she's opening and closing her hands and stuff. I mean, that's just a display model suit. She's not actually wearing a suit that is actually pressurized. She's wearing a pair of Nike boots, which they're not even sealed. So you can't pressurize the suit when she walks out on stage. The woman weighs maybe 45 kilograms, and you expect to see her bend down and pick a rock up with a 110 kilogram suit on. Absolutely impossible. The suit doesn't weigh that much. And if you go online, you can see the open contracts to actually make that suit. There's open bids available for contractors to actually build that suit, from the active seals, the computerized robotics to assist in the opening and closing of the gloves and that when the suit is pressurized, as well as the materials for insulation, abrasion, and micrometeor. They're all open bids there. They haven't actually built that suit. That's just a display model design of what the thing should look like.
It's just to keep the budget going. I think they're spending about $55 million a day. And I live on the Space Coast. I'm right down the road from NASA. So I'm in their backyard. But all of the numbers don't line up. The fact that allegedly the International Space Station is only flying at 400 miles above the Earth. And yet the moon is 238,000 miles from the Earth, allegedly. Why is it that we haven't gone back in almost 50 years, and now they're talking about Mars? And as you mentioned, they want to control the entire narrative. And the reason they want to do that is because they can't hide it in plain sight like they used to back in the 60s and early 70s. With all of the technology available and the internet and people like yourself constantly investigating this, they know they're going to be exposed as the frauds that they are. And so what they do is they compartmentalize it, keep shoving CGI photos down the throat of the public, and spending a lot of that money just on PR to propagate the continuation of their budget.
That's a interesting story about Gus Grissom. This one here, where allegedly he said a few minutes before he burned to death, he said, "Hey, you guys in the control center, get with it. You expect me to go to the moon, and you can't even maintain telephonic communications over 3 miles." Do you think he actually said that?
I think it was between 2 buildings.
Or between 2 buildings, yes. That's also something. Did he say that, though? Do you think so?
Yes, he did. And it is
Goodness.
recorded. You can watch a video on his last words.
My goodness.
It is online.
So that means NASA knew.
They knew exactly what they're doing. They
Yeah.
hired the best professionals in the world, remember? They don't make mistakes.
Allegedly. That also means that Walter Cronkite was also in on this.
Oh, absolutely.
Amazing.
You know exactly what's going on.
And of course, now I think we should get into some of the slides and photographs you had talked about in regards to the suit that they wore.
Okay, the very first photograph up there that you're looking at is the
glove, yes.
large gap in the glove, and the actual ring connection is at the base of that gauntlet where they connect. If the seal isn't connected to the suit, they're just using this as a costume to run around in. And if you're on Earth running around in a garment like that, you're going to get pretty hot. So you're going to want to get as much air in the suit as you can and hide it as much as possible. And if you look at that, you can see it's kind of pinned down on the front corner there, like at the front of the suit where the dirt is. It's just kind of pinned on there. But the actual, right down where you see the other band, where right at the glove between that and the gauntlet, that is exactly where the other ring connection is. So there's about 3 inches space between it there.
Oh, by the way, hold on one moment. Lee, can you see that photograph?
No, I can't. What do I need to do that?
I think I'm going to have to send you a link unless you are in the chat room. Sending it to you now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, I just wanted you to follow along here. This is quite interesting stuff. The spacesuit is bizarre. And of course, the temperature on the moon is about 150 degrees during the lunar day, maybe even higher than that. I'm not even sure how that film even survived.
It's a boiling temperature if you were on the moon.
Right, and I'm just thinking, so how they use special film apparently, but I just don't think that would even sustain that sort of heat, let alone a live feed. My God.
That's why we're doing vacuum testing on the film itself. Because when you get to a certain level of vacuum, you start to get off-gassing of materials. Just as you put water into a vacuum chamber and it boils at room temperature, it'll boil away. So you have every material has its melting point, every material has a boiling point. The vacuum is replacing the temperature of the water to create it to boil at room temperature. So there's an association between temperature and vacuum or pressure, or lack of pressure. So if you bring the vacuum level down low enough, plastics melt in the 120 degree Celsius to about 240 if it's the S-star film, right? It'll start to melt at that point and it'll start to off-gas. And when it starts to off-gas, it's going to dry out. It's going to get very hard and brittle. And it will not roll up onto a film. And the emulsion that's in between the layers of plastic of the film is going to dry out, and you won't be able to take a picture with it because it'll just become hard. You won't be able to photograph, right? Now, some of the film was outboard on the Apollo craft all the way from launch. The outside of the CSM, the data camera on the outside that took 1 frame per second, so-called, when they were orbiting the moon, stayed out there the entire trip to the moon while it was orbiting the moon, and it wasn't until they did a spacewalk to pick it up to bring it back inside before it was back into a pressurized system again. Now, if you look at this picture down, which is Neil Armstrong full suit, which is figure 4, if you look at the glove right there, when I was talking about the other glove, you can see the ring connections there. You can see the length of the gauntlet, and you can see where the ring actually is, where it actually has to connect together, right? When that gauntlet is up, there's a good 3 inches of space on that. So when you're looking at the top photograph and you can see the ring that's there, you know there's no way those two could be connected. The next series of photographs down here are running through the history of the initial stages of how the suit was developed through up until you get to the Apollo missions. And when you get down just past where Buzz is putting his sunglasses in his pocket there, the next photograph down there, this is an example of how the suit should be made. You're looking at a suit with an outer abrasion suit and an inner bladder with flexible joints in it and stuff like that. But the suit that is on display, the Figure 4 suit, doesn't have any of that inner bladder inside of it. And as we scroll down a little farther through the different suits, you get down to Figure 10. If you scroll down to Figure 10,
Figure 10, okay.
That. Now you can see that inner bladder is not inside that suit. They just have a foam comfort layer, and you're looking at the back of the suit with a zipper there, and the ring, of course, that steel ring has to be sealed to the suit. And that's the back side of the suit, and the zipper comes up there, and there's a great big gap. You can't pressurize that suit. The air is going to escape right out the back of it. It's not even sealed to it. The ring is not sealed to the entire suit. And that bubble helmet is so-called sealing onto that red ring. And the only thing that's holding that on, those are just like door hinge clips. They just snap in and out. There's no way to compress the seal. And when you're in that level of vacuum, not only do you have to compress the seals would have to be made out of steel, not rubber. You get beyond a torr value of 10 to the minus 6, and you can't use rubber anymore. You have to now use metal seals, and one-time use only metal seals when you're out that far. And to give everybody an idea where torr value of 10 to the minus 6 vacuum is, that is 130 miles off the surface of the Earth. You go out beyond that, and it really gets severe. You're into a really hard vacuum. And now the International Space Station is sitting at 255 miles, 400 kilometers, and you're at a torr value of 10 to the minus 7. You're already getting into off-gassing. You have to use one-time only seals on it. You do a spacewalk. If you went out through your airlock chambers, before you come back in, you would have to have brand new seals on it before you could lock the door and seal it again, or it wouldn't seal.
And just for the sake of conversation, why would NASA go through all the trouble to fake the moon landing?
Had to prove that they were the most powerful nation in the world. They had the highest technology. Basically, the Apollo and NASA were a military mission. They were all military men, right, that were working for it. It's a military operation. They made it look like it was an independent space mission on a different type of mission, but the idea was to prove to the world that they were the most powerful nation out there.
Even more important than just the wet flag, this is from the slideshow, by the way, Scott. And
yes,
this is from the water. You could see water is peeling up the paint between the glass.
Oh yeah, that's been there for quite a while. Why would they put a rain guard on the outside of a spacecraft?
That's crazy.
Yeah. Was there a cold front hitting the moon that day?
In the PowerPoint presentation, that would be slide 34, I believe.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at it.
One of the most devastating things, of course, are the images of water in a vacuum. And of course, there's absolutely no way that there'd be any standing water.
There shouldn't be moisture at all.
Even if they did a simulation and had a bit of a vacuum in a controlled room to try and reproduce it, right? They wouldn't be able to actually do that. The one that really, this one here.
Yeah, I do have that now, by the way, for those in the chat room. The flag photograph is up there in the chat room, and you could clearly see that the American flag is showing a wet spot there. It's quite big, actually. It goes all the way around.
This one is also interesting because it just shows you the equipment was, of course, prepared in a clean room. loaded on a spacecraft, sent to the moon, and they dragged it out, opened it up, and then took a picture of it. And that last image that I showed you of the seismic experiment, there's actually standing water on it. Plus, you can see where there's mold and where the water has dried back with the dirt on it. This has just been sitting outside on a simulation set, and it's been used over and over and over again until they did the final simulations. They never bothered to put it away. They never bothered to clean it up. They didn't do anything.
The equipment left outside to whether NASA is using these same props until it is in such bad shape. And that's kind of what we went over the last program, that they recycle their equipment.
Yeah, it's a very important feature that they were using the same set for all 6 missions. And that is part of my research and findings, right? And this is just one example of it. Every piece of equipment is being used over and over again. It's the exact same LEM for all 6 missions that you're looking at. And Apollo 16, when it took off, they blew the side panels off the thing. And Apollo 17, they have replaced the panels on the side and put a few things on. The bell housing was damaged in Apollo 15, and it's still the same damaged bell housing in Apollo 17. Exactly the same crinkled. Apollo 15, they actually dropped it while they were doing the simulations. And if you watch any of my videos, if you put in Faking Space Season 2, it's on the Apollo Detectives site, and that video has been put together as one video. The main parts of my research are all in that one video.
And now, for fun, I do have a animated GIF up in the chat room now of the American flag just there, waving around, while the astronauts just walk around.
Is that Apollo 16 when they're shooting by them?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah, and people are saying, oh, they touched it, or it's static, or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not highly likely.
What do you think of that, Lee? These photographs?
They're
interesting, right?
Yeah, they're just another layer of evidence that proves we never went to the moon.
What my research is doing is showing you exactly how they prepared the set, how they photographed it, and the exact equipment. That, like everything is non-functional equipment that they were using. They were just props for the set, right? All the experimental equipment is just hooked up with an orange band. There's no actual wires in the cable, right? And they just stick them on the bottom of a frame. They're not plugged into anything. And the astronauts, because they wanted to expose the fraud, they took the central station, which is just a square box with foil on it, and they opened the foil up because it was collecting all the data from all of the other experiments. There should be all kinds of equipment in there to collect the data, digitize it, and then transmit it back to Earth. And it would have a great big battery in there, about 1.5 times the size of a car battery is supposed to be in there to power it. Great big computer, and all this collection data and so-called hard drives long before a hard drive was invented. And then all the equipment to actually transmit it back. And it doesn't even have an antenna to send the signal back with, right? But they ripped the foil off and showed it. There's nothing inside.
Now, by the way, Scott, I have one of the most interesting slides and photographs up from your PowerPoint presentation. That would be slide 40 of the can of beer. And yet again, it goes back to Quebec, back to what Casing mentioned about some of the various stages.
Well, of course, Canada had some participation in the Apollo missions because they actually made the landing legs for the Eagle. They're the guys that designed those folding legs in that lightweight aluminum on there. The beer can just happens to be parked there for someone to take a picture of, one of the whistleblower astronauts, right? When they're out on the set, somebody just dropped one in the dirt there.
One of your naysayers, by the way, Scott, in a video was mentioning this beer can photograph and saying this was purely pareidolia.
It really looks like that, doesn't it? Right? There isn't a footprint around. I mean, you can't have a piece of metal on the lunar surface that reflects like that and has a label on the side of it. And I don't care how you do it. He can call me a liar all he wants. That's a beer can, you know? And he can show it to all of his friends, and they can tell him the difference. Right? And that's the same with all of the other images out there and the cars and everything else. Right? If you don't believe me, show it to your friends.
We haven't even talked about Buzz Aldrin's watch yet. My goodness, another great photograph we'll talk in a minute about here.
Yes, well, I haven't looked up all the watches and the times on the different ones where you can actually see the time on the watch and compared them to the journal files when the photograph was taken. That particular image there shows the difference between Apollo 11 and Apollo 15 where they've put the rover in, and it folds up into that area, and it has swing arms that pull it down, the wheels pop open, it unfolds, and the way it was supposed to run. And of course, they would have practiced that and made it work. They would have built that thing and made it work so that it would unload and operate like that to the ground here. But then they would have to put the batteries in, and they'd have to put the seats in, and then all the other equipment on board. It would probably take a couple of hours, even if you're doing a simulation, to get the thing set up properly. There is one video, it takes nearly an hour for them to get it unloaded. Time-wise, on Apollo 15, they claim they had it in about 17 minutes and driving it around.
Yeah, but if you're doing it on a soundstage, it's a lot quicker.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. The simulation of them showing it on the ground, just in practice, was over an hour to get it set up.
Yeah.
But they did it in 17 minutes when they got to the moon. So they got quicker when they got up there. I guess it's lighter.
And now we have the photograph up in the chat room of Buzz Aldrin's watch.
Yeah, it's interesting the time, because they should be on UTC time because they're being tracked so-called worldwide, and the communication links are coming through from everywhere, so they'd be on universal time. That watch is exactly set at Flagstaff time. Okay.
That's pretty good.
Are you seeing the photograph now, Lee?
I am on Skype right now. I also Googled it.
If you look at the journal log when the actual photograph was taken, it's actually at Flagstaff time because that's where they were doing the simulation. And of course, his watch would be set to that time because that's where they were. And that's just another verification of where they were when the simulation was taken.
So was the moon landing shot on a soundstage, or was it shot outside?
They would have shot the descent in studios, the orbit of the moon, the translunar injection, all of that would have been shot indoor. They were using those large models and their rail tracks that you see, those images they have of those, and their maps, those were all done inside. Everything the astronauts were doing, as far as I'm concerned, were done strictly outdoors. When you see the water, when you see the damage, when you see the paint peeling off, like when you get to Apollo 16, the paint's peeling off it everywhere on the outside. It's just left outside in the sun.
Right.
They didn't even bother to take it inside. And when you get into the rover and you need a larger set, that's where Cinder Lake comes in, right? That's where they're running around. That's where they built the model of Hadley Rill. And if you look at the images of Hadley Rill, they're standing beside a rill that is supposed to be 1,200 feet deep, or approximately the same height as the Empire State Building, straight down and a mile across. The simulation set for the rill that they built is about 150 or 60 feet across and about 60 feet down, and that's what you actually see in the photographs. And you can compare that using the physical size of the rover sitting at the side of the rill. I mean, at 1,200 feet, you wouldn't be able to see the rocks. You can see very clearly defined rocks on it. That rill is approximately the same width as Meteor Crater in Arizona, and over twice as deep. You look at any of the photographs of Hadley Rill, and it's not even close, but it's about the same size as they built for the simulation at Flagstaff on Cinder Lake.
And just for fun, what would convince you that we did go to the moon?
If I could have lunch at Donald Trump's Plaza Hotel, on the lunar surface.
I like that. I like that.